UFC 303 is this weekend, and in this video, we are going to take a look at the biggest fights on the card and talk about the stakes and the matchups without giving a prediction for the fight. Those will come later in the week. So stick around to hear my thoughts on UFC 303. I'm Wyatt, and this is Fight Society. We'll start with the prelims. The first fight of the night is Ricky Simón and Vinicius Oliveira. Now, Ricky Simón has been a mainstay in the UFC bantamweight division, and he's made a name for himself. He defeated Merab Dvalishvili. I believe he was actually the last person to defeat Merab before he went on this run that has led him to a title shot against Sean O'Malley. And he's going up against Vinicius Oliveira, who is coming off of a highlight reel flying knee knockout win over Bernardo Sapage in the Apex. Now, this is a big jump up to go straight from UFC debut fighter Bernardo Sapage to Ricky Simón, who has been there and done that. It looks like they're trying to push Vinicius Oliveira into the rankings. It seems like his fight style is something that they like a lot and something that they want to put on big cards like UFC 303 and start working him towards the rankings. Ricky Simón, this is a big risk. He probably could have gotten one of those fringe top 15 guys, somebody that's close to the rankings at 135. And if he gets a win here, he's definitely going to get that sort of matchup. But going into this fight, huge risk for him against a very explosive, very on-fire fighter in Vinicius Oliveira. And we'll see what happens, but I'm very excited to see if Vinicius Oliveira is for real against a mainstay veteran in the UFC like Ricky Simón, or if Ricky Simón stands his ground, beats back an up-and-coming contender, and gets a ranked opponent after this. Now, moving up from there, we have Ray Tsuruya. Ray Tsuruya is a Road to the UFC alum. He is 9-0. So even though it is Alex Pereira and Jiri Prochazka in the main event now, this was a Conor McGregor card to start. They love to put prospects on Conor McGregor cards because they don't get paid very much. Conor's an expensive main event, and it brings eyes to the people that they want to push as the future of the UFC. Now, Tsuruya, fantastic flyweight, going up against Carlos Hernandez. And it looks like putting him on what was a Conor McGregor card. This is something that this is somebody that they want to push. 125 is on fire right now. You already have Tatsuro Taira running it at 125 as a Japanese flyweight. He's probably going to fight Pantoja later in the year, but you also have some other fantastic flyweight prospects like Muhammad Makayev are actually making flyweight very interesting for the first time in a while. So, moving on from there, we have Andrei Arlovski against Martin Buday. Martin Buday has only one loss in the UFC, and it was to Shamil Gaziev. Andrei Arlovski is just still fighting for some reason because they pay him probably $250,000 or $500,000 to show because of how long he's been in the UFC. And they keep him on because he's got name value. They can put up-and-coming heavyweight prospects up against him and build prospects' names off of Arlovski's name. Now, I assume that Arlovski's going to lose this fight. The odds are against him. I don't think that Martin Buday is the future of heavyweight. I don't think he's the most talented heavyweight. He lost to Shamil Gaziev. We saw Shamil Gaziev beat him and then go off and get cooked by Rosenstrike. So it doesn't really seem like Martin Buday is somebody that's going to compete with the top of the heavyweight division. But it will be nice to see if he can get a win against somebody like Andrei Arlovski, because a win over Arlovski will mean a top 15 heavyweight for him. Moving on from there, we have Michelle Waterson Gomez, the karate hottie, against Gillian Robertson. Now, this is a ranked women's strawweight bout. Gillian Robertson is hot recently, but she does not have the best career record. I think she's something like 13-9, 14-10, something like that. So not the best record, especially not in the UFC. She's going up against a vet in Michelle Waterson Gomez. And this is a great fight, but it's on the early prelims. It seems like kind of the same thing as the fight before, which was Arlovski and Buday, where they're trying to build an up-and-coming prospect in Robertson against a veteran, almost out-the-door name like Michelle Waterson Gomez. It is something to keep an eye on. They are trying to build prospects' names off of vets' names that are on their way out the door. Moving from the early prelims to the prelims, you have the bantamweight that everybody's been talking about lately, Peyton Talbot. He's going up against Giannis Gamori. This is very obviously them trying to build Peyton Talbot's name. He is a minus 1,600 favorite. Giannis Gamori is a plus 900 underdog. Peyton Talbot is a future superstar. Literally, he is right there. A big win on a card like this will shoot him into the stratosphere. It will shoot him into the stratosphere. I have no doubt about that. They're already talking about him against people like Sean O'Malley, which is way premature in my opinion, but I do think he'll get there someday. I do think that Peyton Talbot is somebody that'll be fighting for belts someday, and he absolutely cooked Cameron Simon, who was looked at as a touted bantamweight prospect. So Peyton Talbot, look, he's going to style on this guy, Giannis Gamori. I'll be very surprised if he loses this fight or even makes it look competitive. But on the ESPN prelims, he's going to have a lot of eyes on him. This is just what Peyton Talbot needs to get a absolute masterclass sort of win, hopefully a finish, and move on to not a ranked opponent yet. I think he's only 25. So move on to one of those people like a Ricky Simone, who's earlier in the card, somebody that's one of those fringe ranking guys that could maybe be ranked like 14th or 15th. But then again, if I'm Peyton Talbot, I wouldn't want to rush it. I'd want to take my time, put wins together, work my way up so that when I do reach the top of the division, I'm experienced and seasoned enough to where you can string together wins and get yourself a title shot. Moving on from there, we have a featherweight bout between Charles Air Jourdain and Gene Silva. This is going to be a crazy striking matchup. Jourdain lost to Sean Woodson in his last fight at UFC 297. He looked very good. It was a close fight. Gene Silva's a freaking madman, though. Jesus Christ. I believe he was barking at his last opponent. I think it was Weston Wilson. Yeah, Gene Silva was barking at his last opponent, which was Weston Wilson. Guy's an absolute animal. Charles Jourdain's a dog. I truly expect this to be a crazy fight where Charles Jourdain does not back down against somebody like Gene Silva. Gene Silva scared the shit out of Weston Wilson, and he's going to be facing a very different opponent in this fight that's not going to get rattled at an aggressive offensive opponent. So whoever wins this fight's probably going to get a ranked opponent as well. You see, there's a lot of these fringe ranking matchups on this card. I'm probably going to lean towards Silva, though. It is Charles Jourdain. He always has a few tricks up his sleeve, and I think that this is going to be a really entertaining fight. This fight could get really crazy early. Moving on from there, we have Cub Swanson and Andre Fili, both guys that have been in the featherweight division in the UFC for a very long time. Cub Swanson has been around since the WEC days. Andre Fili has, I think, close to 20 UFC bouts. This is one of those where none of these guys are a title contender. Actually, it's very similar to the fight before it, Charles Jourdain and Gene Silva, where one of these guys could string together a couple of wins and get towards a ranking. But really what this is adding name value to the card that's not prospects. And I do like this matchup. I'll make a prediction later in the week, but this is something to keep an eye on. This is going to be a fun fight. Very experienced guys, not two guys that are prospects that they're trying to build someone's name. This is actually veterans that they're trying to use to build name value for the card. But very exciting matchup. Will most likely be mostly on the feet, but tune into that one. Very good fight to keep an eye on. We move on from there to the feature prelim of the night, which is Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Joe Pyfer is coming off of his loss to Jack Hermansson, where he was an unranked middleweight that got a fight night main event. And he lost that fight. He won the first 2 rounds, and then it slipped away. It was just levels to this type of performance where he wasn't ready for a ranking. He wasn't ready for a ranked opponent, but the UFC does like him. So they have him going up against somebody who just was fighting for a ranking at UFC 297 when he fought Chris Curtis, where he lost. Very good, 2 hard hitters that can mix in some wrestling. This is Joe Pyfer's chance to get a respectable win against a very tough opponent. And then they just go, all right, here you go. Here's another ranking. It's like, even if he looks like shit and gets a win, they're going to put him in there with a Chris Curtis or an Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, somebody like that, because Dana really likes Joe Pyfer, and they want Joe Pyfer in the rankings. They want Joe Pyfer working his way up towards a title fight. I'm telling you, something like Joe Pyfer and Bo Nickel is going to be like a fight night main event in like a year when they're both ranked. You have striker versus striker for the most part, both hard hitters. I could see this fight ending early. I don't think this is going to turn into a sparring match like Marc-Andre Barriault's fight with Chris Curtis. So make sure to keep an eye on that one. We move on to the main card. Ian Garry versus Michael Page. A lot of online smack talk between these two. Ian Garry wanted Wonder Boy. I think Michael Page also wanted Wonder Boy. Perfect. You guys fight each other for the Wonder Boy fight. Ian Machado, Garry absolutely glazed Conor to the point where they put him on a Conor card. He begged for it long enough. He did it on short notice. He doesn't cut a lot of weight, so it's not hard for him to take a fight on 5 weeks' notice. And just funny that he glazed his way onto a Conor card and then gets cucked out of being on the Conor card because Conor gets hurt. But he's going up against Michael Page. Michael Page is a big welterweight. I believe he used to be a middleweight at one point. He's going up against Ian Garry, who only cuts from about 180 pounds to make 170. So he's not a big welterweight. He's gonna be giving up some size. Now on paper, it's like, hell yeah, dude. 2 crazy good strikers going up against each other. International Fight Week. This one's gonna be sick, but don't get me wrong. I am ready 100%, and you should too, for this fight to be 3 rounds of low kicking at range. You have to be ready for this because Ian Garry backs up a lot. Michael Page doesn't fight on the front foot a whole lot. Definitely keep an eye on this fight because it is one of the bigger name value fights on the card, but it's not a fight that's going to make fight of the night. Absolutely no chance at all. This is fight of the night. Maybe they prove us wrong, but I'm telling you, this is going to be a boring fight. They're going to get booed by the fans. Opening the main card too, Ian Garry's going to get booed if he makes this a boring fight. So winner of this fight is going to be looking at a top 5 opponent. Ian Machado Garry could be looking at like a Jack Della Maddalena. Michael Page could be looking at a Wonder Boy if he wins. Maybe even Shavkat, something like that. So we'll see. But this is a title eliminator of sorts because the winner of this fight's going to get a top 5 matchup. So I'd say the winner of this fight is going to be in a number 1 contenders fight. We move on from there. Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson. Don't know why this is on the main card. Diversity hire type shit. You have Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barrio. You have Cub Swanson and Andre Feely. Charles Jourdain. You know what they should have done? They should have put Peyton Talbot on the main card. Get him some real exposure. But anyways, Macy Chiasson, last time I saw her, I think she got finished by an up kick to the liver from Irene Aldana. I think that's the last time I saw her fight. And then Mayra Bueno Silva put on an absolute stinker at 297 for the Bantamweight Championship against Raquel Pennington. This does not deserve an International Fight Week main card. Just call it what it is. Diversity hire type shit. We're moving on. Anthony Smith is taking on Roman Dolidze. Now, this fight has had a lot of changes. This fight started off as Khalil Roundtree, Jamal Hill. Khalil Roundtree fails a drug test or admits that he took a banned substance. It becomes Jamal Hill, Carlos Ulberg. Ulberg pulls out, or Jamal Hill pulls out. It becomes Smith versus Ulberg, and then Ulberg pulls out. And now we have Anthony Smith fighting Roman Dolidze, a middleweight, at 205 on a week and a half's notice. I'm sure they wanted to keep the name value on the card. Roman Dolidze trains at Extreme Couture. He's already in Vegas. It's not a huge undertaking for him to take a fight at 205. He's coming off of a loss against Nasruddin Imavov. I don't think he stays at 205. I think this is just a, hey, here's a fat check. Help us out with this card. Anthony Smith, on the other hand, just beat back a prospect in Vitor Petrino at UFC 301. I'm telling you, Anthony Smith, coming off of a win over Vitor Petrino and then beating a 185er, if he wins, he's going to call for a title shot because Alex Pereira is on the same card. He's already talking about, it lines up, all that shit. We're not going for it. We're not going for it. Maybe I want to see you get your ass beat by Poetan, but we're not going for this, okay? Anthony Smith, you're delusional if you think you're getting a title shot off of this win. And honestly, it'd be fucking hilarious if we see him get absolutely smoked by a middleweight on a week's notice. So we'll see what happens here. I'm probably going to lean towards Anthony Smith, but it would be absolutely fucking hilarious if he takes an L in this fight. We move on to the co-main event that was added at the same time as the new main event. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. This is going to be Brian Ortega's last fight at 145. Brian Ortega has said that he is going to be moving up to 155 pounds after this fight. He said that he had a fight booked at lightweight for September in the Sphere. Obviously, that's probably off the table. Maybe not. It is 2.5 months away. But nonetheless, he's fighting Diego Lopes. They're trying to get Diego Lopes a win here against a guy that's about to leave the division, that has a high ranking. So they put him up against Brian Ortega. If he gets a win, he's ranked 3rd. Put him up against Movsar. That's who Diego Lopez called out. Brian Ortega, even if he wins, he's going to go up to 155. He said that there's no title shot for him at 145 because it's rumored, according to Brian Ortega, Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway is already signed for the featherweight belt And then Volk still owed a rematch with Topuria. He had 5 title defenses. It just is what it is. Even if he got knocked out, Volk is 1000% owed a title fight against Ilia Topuria. And if Max Holloway beats Topuria, then Volk definitely deserves a shot because it's somebody he beat 3 times. So we'll see what happens there. This fight could be over quick. We saw Brian Ortega almost get out of there quick when Yair was cooking him on the feet. Diego Lopes is a shark in there. He is a finisher. I'm probably going to lean towards Diego Lopes in this. I'll make a video about that later in the week, but this is a banger fight. This could be performance bonus for Diego Lopes. This could be fight of the night if Brian Ortega is enough of a human punching bag to survive the first round and then sub Diego Lopes in the second round like he did with Yair. We move on to the main event, Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka. 2 absolute chads stepping in on short notice, on about 2.5 weeks notice, for sure getting paid a shit ton of money to take over the Conor McGregor main event. Rematch from UFC 295 where Alex Pereira won via second round TKO at Madison Square Garden. Pereira's my favorite fighter, so I'm not going to glaze him too hard. And I'm actually a little worried that Yuri's going to clip him with something. Alex might just be taking this fight for the money because he was talking about taking a little bit of time off. He has 2 broken toes. He just fought at UFC 300. He hasn't taken much. He didn't take any damage at UFC 300. Yuri took a lot of damage. So actually, as I'm explaining this, I think I'm leaning towards Pereira now because of how much damage Yuri took from Rakic at UFC 300. So there you have it. Top from bottom to top, UFC 303. The main event is going to take place on the feet. Going to be a banger, but I could see Alex with an early KO. I think whoever wins this fight, it's over in the first 2 rounds. So there you have it. UFC 303 this weekend. There's my take. A closer look at UFC 303, taking a look at the matchups and the stakes on the card without giving predictions. Those will come later in the week. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want extra content aside from my regular videos, make sure to become a channel member today to get access to members-only live streams and other bonus perks. Click the link in the description down below or click the join button on our channel homepage. If you're interested in non-MMA content from me, make sure to check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World.